and welcome to this week's book club episode for Star Wars Catalyst by James Luceno. If you're joining us for the first time, congratulations, you're just in time for the end of the book. If you're not familiar with the series, we're going through this novel a couple of chapters at a time to dig into the themes and happenings up close, really taking our time to discuss everything, but we've hit the end of Catalyst. Congratulations, everyone. If you would like to see this book from the beginning, check the description of the video. There's a playlist for this, as well as the other books we have done in this book club series, and it would be wonderful to have you join us with some of our other readings. But with that, we're going to discuss chapters 27 and 28, where we find ourselves today. Krennic is barging into the Urso residence, and it specifically said, like, you know, he's running a little late, traffic's been terrible because there's this big all-species festival, and he doesn't have any wine with him, and what's interesting here is Krennic is enraged. He is feeling at a loss, you know, and we've seen him in these last couple of chapters feeling like he's on top of everything. He has control of everything. He has been making the weapon. He has, you know, gotten Galen where he wanted Galen to be. He's thwarted Tarkin. And then just having his faith shaken over what was happening in the last couple of chapters, or just up until this point, and really having his confidence shaken by Lyra, he's completely lost all form of tact and strategy, right? Krennic got from being under Tarkin's thumb and being the kind of guy that everyone's like, all right, we know who you are, but, like, what the heck are you doing here? He went from being that guy to the guy that is running what's going to become the Death Star, and he got there by being smart. I mean, he played Haas and Tarkin off of each other in a way that was almost luck more than anything else, but now he's kind of on his hind legs and has lost that. You know, and at this point what he doesn't really realize is the extent to which Galen and Lyra are connected again. So yes, he has kind of lost, and he might not really recognize that yet, or shouldn't necessarily have recognized that yet. But at the same time, here he's leading right with accusing Lyra, telling Galen that they, you know, that he was pushing her, and that they're in front of Lyra saying how he doesn't want her to take him away from his research. I mean, he is kind of throwing all his cards on the table at a really untactical moment to do that. And I think this kind of shows the true difference between Krennic and Tarkin, and why Tarkin kind of always comes out on top, is Krennic really, like, he wants power, but he wants power for the sake of fame, in my opinion. And he feels like he's owed a certain amount for playing the game he's been playing so well. Maybe he doesn't recognize that in himself. Versus Tarkin is always aware that the game can always be moving and changing. You know, Tarkin's kind of in it for the game, as much as he's also in it for the power. That's just kind of the difference between the two minds. So Krennic, I think, is cracking under his own success, in a way. And he's cracking under the fact that he's tricked and duped everyone, instead of actually, like, achieving and locking in any kind of particular thing. So here we see Krennic kind of in his spiral, as he feels like he's so close to everything he's wanted, but it's starting to fall apart. He's played by Galen and Lyra, who kind of put him at ease. Galen is able to do that by, like, first seeming like he has the same concerns that Lyra has, which of course he does, but then kind of not exactly turning on Lyra, but siding with Krennic, and that appeases Krennic's ego, and Krennic leaves. Krennic is then brooding in his speeder. He's still mad about traffic. He's still mad about Lyra, and it's clouding his tactics. He's trying to figure out how to get rid of Lyra and Jyn, because if they weren't in the picture, there's no emotional connection for Galen. But if he removes them, then there's, you know, that's something that Galen would find unforgivable, and he's trying to figure out how to make that happen. Because at the end of the day, Krennic can't understand actual love, right? He can't understand actual human connection. He can't understand somebody who's altruistic. He's trying to move Galen in that way, but he's moving Galen in a way that he doesn't truly, or Krennic doesn't truly feel or truly understand. So he's really focusing on that when he hits this next spiral, because Tarkin calls brings up Haas Obit and says he's headed to Coruscant to meet with someone, wondering if it could be the Ursos, or at least Krennic is worried that he's going to the Ursos, and so then he decides he's going to return. That clearly Galen and Lyra were attempting to run, and he's going to go back, catch him in the act, and, that he's now worried that Tarkin and Haas have crossed paths, which he's not wrong. Tarkin and Haas have crossed paths, and are kind of working in their own purposes now, as we will see. But it's also not quite as simple as he's saying. I think Krennic is smart enough to figure out what's going on here, but he is so consumed by his hatred for and his rivalry with Lyra that he's not seeing what's actually happening here. And to some extent, not even Tarkin is seeing it. But that's because Tarkin doesn't know all the pieces. I think Krennic has enough of the pieces to see this, but like I said, he's in his spiral. Galen and Lyra talk. Galen understands now how much he was played and confesses to Lyra that he actually gave away more of his research than he should have, and realizes now that they've weaponized it. And Lyra is obviously upset that he did this, but she's forgiving of him. And when Galen says that all that matters is her and Jyn, and they embrace, she's like, Galen is back. So this is the other half. We saw Galen and Jyn together kind of having this moment, and this is Lyra fully aware that she has her husband again. And he's come back to her. She tells him that Haas has contacted them. And so reading this for the first time, you're like, oh no, Krennic has figured it out. Haas is coming. They are going to get caught. And it really builds up the tension. The tension in these last couple of chapters is really expertly done, I think. Now you're worried about them getting away, and Galen is trying to erase just enough information to slow Krennic down, but he doesn't really want to tip his hat in any particular way because Krennic will know what he's doing, so they're kind of trying to figure this out. Krennic arrives too late. The Ursos are already gone to see the festival. They say that that's their excuse. Krennic then locks everything down and goes hunting, which is, again, the tension I was talking about. We go to the Ursos, who are on the run. Galen took his most personal research. It's in his pocketbook or in his mind, but he left a lot of what was there behind. And his thoughts were, one, they'll have it anyway. They'd recover it anyway. Two, he doesn't want to give the Empire more reason to come after them. He's still kind of living in this naive world that maybe he can just walk away and they won't be hunted for the rest of their life. And Lyra's like, no, that's not how this is going to go. But points out that revenge really isn't in Galen's nature. And what I appreciate too is when Lyra says revenge is not in your nature, that he says there's not even really, he doesn't say it like this, but he says, in his mind there's not really something to take revenge for. That yeah, Krennic played him, but he didn't force him to do anything. So Galen is really more upset with himself even than Krennic at that point. So they're trying to get away, they're trying to avoid facial recognition, and Lyra moves them to the crowd because she knows how to get around because of her long walks with Jyn. We get to Haas lands. Tarkin, in his internal monologue, we learn that Tarkin wants him as an inside man to Krennic, and that's why Tarkin let him go. Tarkin now thinks that he has him in his back pocket, and he will use him as a way to bring Krennic down. It's at this point that it becomes a little suspect that he could even really be there for the Ursos, because he's not really talking about the Ursos. Krennic does arrive, he accuses him, but the Ursos aren't there. So here, again, if you were reading it for the first time, is when the tension kind of turns. We go back to the Ursos, and they're stuck at a checkpoint. They risk going through facial recognition. Galen is still doing his thing of, like, maybe we really didn't do anything wrong. Maybe, I can explain away what I did. And right before they have to make the decision what to do next, Saw Gerrera shows up. And Saw says, I'm actually parked over here. Like, if you can get us back to my ship, we're going to go this way. I'm a friend of Haas's. It becomes apparent that this was really the plan. And I liked that because what Galen was doing was covering up communications but leaving just enough so that Krennic would see those and go, yes, the Ursos are going to meet with Haas. But Haas was always a red herring, and that they were always supposed to meet with Saw, and he deleted the messages that talked about the Onderon man that they were supposed to meet, that Krennic wouldn't know anything about. And Krennic would just jump straight to the conclusion he's supposed to, which is to go after Haas. And yes, they would eventually recover those messages, but it would take so long that they would hopefully, in theory, be gone. This is also a nice moment because it's just Saw and Jyn meeting for the first time, which, even though we don't get to see a lot of their relationship in Rogue One, it's very clear that they had this deep emotional connection that was severed. And here we're seeing the beginning of that, and they run off. Krennic is mad. His mind is turning. He knows he's been played, but he can't see. He knows that Haas is connected somehow, but he can't truly prove it. And he's angry, and he just goes outside and screams Galen's name. So this is the emotional Krennic that I actually really like a lot. Part of why I like Krennic and why I find him such an interesting Imperial, that he's not the cold, calculated Tarkin or even the cold, calculated Thrawn. You know, he's not the utter composure Imperial. Like, he is this guy who, he's just smart enough, just tactical enough to be in the conversation, but his emotions will always be the reason why he's not the top dog in the Empire more than anything else. And we get to kind of see that moment here. So that's the chapter, End of Proof. I didn't actually get into what the chapter title is, but it's you know, the end of it. I think proof could mean proof evidence, but I think there's so much in these last couple of chapters that have been mathematical theming in their chapter titles. I think it might also mean like end of a proof, like a logical proof, like if A then B, if B then C, if C then D. I don't know that for a fact, but that's kind of how I'm interpreting it, that this is the end of where all of the logical steps in all the games are going. And it ends with Haas outplaying Tarkin and Krennic both, really, with Saw, the man they never saw. So then we hit chapter 28, Transposed, which is again another mathematical term, transposing numbers. Haas has made out well. I actually forgot. I was reading this whole book. I thought Haas died at the end, and it turned out he didn't. He fell in love and ran away, which is not something I'm used to seeing happen. So that's nice. I don't know why I forgot that, but I just always remember that the Ursos ended up with Saw. I'd forgotten that it was a gambit and not because Haas was otherwise disposed. Saw took the Ursos. Nothing came back to him. They never really found evidence about him. Tarkin helped Haas out, thinking that he was a spy for Krennic, but of course Haas is really just there to kind of appease them both. Haas searches for the Ursos, but always manages to just not find them, and he rides off with the barmaid that he loved the whole book, and goes on to his new life. Tarkin arrives on base to oversee the Death Star and to oversee Krennic. It's known that Krennic had to trick Galen into giving up his research. It's pointed out that that actually loses Krennic some prestige, that it wasn't that he convinced Galen to do anything, that he was basically just playing the guy, which, if he had to use such trickery, how could he not control one scientist? So Krennic has lost a lot of prestige, and Tarkin is on his way for taking over the whole project, which of course we will see in Rogue One. It doesn't actually happen until the movie Rogue One, but he is now on the precipice to kind of make that happen once he's done with all of the, well, basically letting Krennic take the blame for all of the inevitable construction delays that would happen when one is making a Death Star. Krennic is talking to Masameda and has the goal to say that he won't be demoted, so it's the same old Krennic, saying effectively that anything that he should be demoted over was all top secret, and no one's gonna know what he was demoted for, and so it's gonna, like, lose confidence in people. And I don't think the book really makes it clear if that happens or not, because of course he's Director Krennic in the movie, and he's not any of the particular ranks that he is here in the book. Krennic is just obsessed with Galen, and he has to get Galen back. He's losing favor and prestige. He knows that. He can't understand why Galen would do this to him, so he's still not understanding why Galen wouldn't want this same life that Krennic has. It is an interesting relationship between the two, because I think at some level, as much as Krennic sees Galen as a pawn, as much as he sees Galen as somebody who can be used, I think he does kind of care for the guy, as much as Krennic is capable of caring for another human being, which is to say not very much, and certainly not without a very selfish focus for that, to think that, well, obviously what's best for you is also what's best for me. But I don't think it's entirely without some concern for Galen. It's just Krennic is kind of a terrible person and doesn't know how to show actual human concern. And I think Galen did care for Orson, care for Krennic. So it's kind of an interesting relationship there. And then we go to the last bit of the book, and I really like that the last bit of the book is from Jen's perspective, just from a writing point of view. Because when people would be reading this book, they would know it's going to be the prelude to Rogue One. It says it right on there, Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, like a prequel to Rogue One. In theory, you are reading this to better understand what's happening in Rogue One. And the main character of Rogue One is Jyn. I mean, yes, it's an ensemble cast, but you're really following her story, and yet she's a child. Like, she's in a lot of these chapters, she's in throughout the whole book, but she's there as another character. It's not her tale being told. So ending the book, in my opinion, from her perspective, is a way of kind of shifting the story, because as near as I can tell, I don't think we even had a chapter from her perspective. There was the chapter between her and Galen the other week where Galen kind of came back to himself, but I don't even think we got it from her perspective, unless I'm misremembering. You know, when you have somebody that's known to be the upcoming main character and you're ending the book from her perspective, I think this is how you're shifting it away from Krennic, from Galen, even from Saw, to saying now it's going to be Jin's tale that is going to be told. She's spending time with Saw. You can see that they bond fast. Jin seems to have that effect with people. She bonded fast with Haas. Everybody except for Krennic, basically, in this book thought she was great. And I think that's something you can see in Rogue One as well. People see Jin and really gravitate to her, even though when you meet her, she's actually completely cynical, right? Her story is one of going from this person who doesn't believe anything, doesn't have a problem because she never looks up, to being the catalyst for an act of rebellion. Even when she has kind of completely lost herself, that part of her is always there. And so it's nice to see that happen even at this early age. That, I mean, yeah, some of it is because she's a cute kid, but that's also just some part of Jin. They find a place to hide. Saw is encouraged by the Urso's bravery. He's like, I think you guys are great, which is kind of... Saw is just such a quirky character. He's like really into people and then really not all at once. But it was nice to see them having this moment together, and I think it establishes why Saw would come and do so much for Jin. That he's not just delivering this family as a favor to Haas, but like he's inspired by them in some way, which is why he'll be there for them when he eventually has to save Jin, as we see in Rogue One. I also like, from Jin's perspective, that she doesn't really know what the Empire is. It talks about she doesn't really know what the Empire is, but it's the reason why she had to leave their droid behind and all of her toys and her dad's clothes. And that's really just her kind of simple understanding of it. And it just shows like her innocence, again, when we will meet her. Not at the very beginning of Rogue One, but when we get to her story after the title card, how she's somebody who's really lost all innocence. And I think it sets up the character that Jin goes back to being by the end of Rogue One. So all in all, I thought it was a really good way to end the book. And that is the end of the story. Catalyst is a great read. I think this is my third time reading it. I said at the start of the series, and I don't say this to be a downer or anything, but like James Luceno as a writer is really hit and miss with me. He has written some of my favorite stuff and he's written some of my least favorite stuff, but with that, Catalyst is one of my favorite books. It's, I think, one of the better lead-in novels to any of the Star Wars movies that have come out in the Disney era. You know, kind of looking like Aftermath was a lead-in novel, which is a great book. We discussed it in this series, but it didn't really set up The Force Awakens per se, because it's a little less than 30 years away from The Force Awakens. Phasma's a great novel as a lead-in to The Last Jedi, but it wasn't really about The Last Jedi. Last Shot is a great book, if you like reading more about Han and Lando, but it didn't really help me feel like any particular way about Solo, a Star Wars story. I would say like Catalyst and Resistance Reborn are the two, which was before Rise of Skywalker, were like the two lead-in novels to the movies that helped set the stage for the movie more than any of the other. And I guess that's 2 out of 5, so it's almost 50%, so maybe I'm being a little unfair there. But I think Catalyst does... I think it kind of serves that purpose, maybe even a little bit better than Resistance Reborn. Resistance Reborn is kind of like this capstone to an era of Star Wars book storytelling, I think even more so than it is a lead into The Rise of Skywalker. And I don't say that as a slam on Resistance Reborn. I like Resistance Reborn a lot. I recommend it. And I don't mean this as a slam either to the other lead-ins, but I feel like Catalyst, more than any of the other lead-in novels, was the one where I sat there and I went, man, I'm so glad I finished this book before the movie, because this really improved my movie experience. Where the other 4 novels, I was really glad to have read them. I thought they were great books. I will recommend them to people, but I didn't feel like my experience with the movie was fundamentally changed by the book. Again, with Resistance Reborn, I was very emotional reading that book, but I was emotional reading that book because of the other books I had read, and it served as this wonderful capstone. It didn't necessarily change Rise of Skywalker for me, which might have been JJ's mystery box's fault more than that book's fault, between you and me. But just to kind of, in summary, talk about Catalyst. I think that it served its purpose. Like, whenever I do book reviews, and these are a little bit more in depth than a simple book review, but whenever I talk about Star Wars material on here, I always want to balance having a quote-unquote positive outlook, right? Not necessarily to say something's great or wonderful, but, like, not to trash and be like, I don't like the thing, I don't like the author, blah, blah, blah. You know, that doesn't help anybody. And even me saying, like, I love this and this is a great book, doesn't really help anybody. Me really liking a book doesn't help you like a book. I like to talk about, does the material do what the material is supposed to do? Does the book set out to do the goal the book had, as far as I'm aware of what the goal of the book was? Catalyst isn't necessarily, like, my favorite Star Wars novel, but more so than any other Star Wars novel, I think it achieved the goal it was supposed to have, which was set the stage for the first Star Wars anthology spin-off film, the first kind of live-action, on-screen experience that, you know, other than, like, the holiday special or the Ewok movies, for something that was going to be a big global stage project, and introduce audiences to people they had never heard of in a canon universe that they were not used to yet. I think Catalyst did exceptional for what it was trying to do. So just as a movie tie-in novel, it felt relevant. Like, obviously you can watch Rogue One and get it without the book. Rogue One stands on its own feet. I can't imagine Rogue One without the context of Catalyst. I guess that's what really makes me excited about the book, is how much it does and how much it connects. Now, of course, when I say all that, I'm talking about the adult novel releases. The YA releases were Lost Stars, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and Force Collector for the 3 new trilogy films, respectively. Most Wanted, which we've done as a book here, and then Rebel Rising for Rogue One. All 5 of those are great and do a lot to set the stage as well. I think Rebel Rising is probably the one that's most relevant because, again, with Lost Stars, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, or Force Collector, you're largely dealing with time periods that are not necessarily, like, when their trilogy films are taking place. So it's really Rebel Rising and Most Wanted that even connect to the movie that they're leading up to. And you all already know I love Most Wanted because we talked about it on the channel already, and you can already see that book club. And Rebel Rising is great by Beth Revis. I really hope Beth Revis gets another Star Wars novel someday, and that one also adds quite a bit to the understanding. When I say, like, how good Catalyst is at what it was trying to do, I'm not at all trying to take away from any other novel. I don't know that there really has been, like, a bad lead-in novel to any of the films. It's just simply that I think Catalyst does it the best. But that's really what I have to say about Catalyst for now. I'm really glad we got to read it together, and I'm looking forward to doing the next book club with you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you the next thing we'll do, by just discussing it with people and comment sections and around, I think we're going to do, I know we're going to do Dark Disciple by Christy Golden. I've already ordered the book in. I read it from the library years ago. I've actually only read that once, so it'll be good to reread it with you guys because I haven't read it since its release. I'm going to take a little bit of a break from the book club series. I like to take some time in between books to kind of refresh, get caught up on my other reading, that sort of thing. Some of you may be aware that there's an election coming up in the US if you're watching these videos as they come out. I am going on a small, socially distanced, safe excursion following the election. I'm gonna go hide under a rock for a while, and not even kidding. When I come back from that, we'll start. So it's the first week of November. I'm going to hide for a little while, and then that probably Mondays still, but sometime that week I'll come back with an announcement for Dark Disciple, and then it'll be the week after, so like the 3rd week of November. That'll also hit near holiday season, especially with some holidays, or like with Thanksgiving in the US. So when we start Dark Disciple, the schedule might be a little wacky. We'll start mid-November with Dark Disciple, but there'll be an announcement on the channel before we do, and everybody will have enough time. But if you don't have the book, get your book now. If you're not already, follow us on all of the socials. I'm excited to talk to you guys about different things. And with that, I will see you guys back at the book club in a couple of weeks.